Ladies and gentlemen, there is a truth we often overlook, buried beneath our search for approval, belonging, and success. Until you respect yourself, no one else truly will. You may earn titles, applause, even admiration, but none of it can fill the hollow space created by a lack of inner respect. Respect, like love, begins at home within the soul. Today, I will share with you 6 key truths not as commandments, but as mirrors to help you see your own worth, stand in it, and ultimately demand it from the world. Every human being harbors a realm within them that lies in darkness, not because it is inherently evil, but because it has been exiled from the light of awareness. It is the part of the self we pretend does not exist, the voice we silence, the desire we label as shameful, the rage we hide behind a smile. This is the shadow. Not an external force, not a devil lurking in the corners of the world, but an intimate companion, silent, persistent, and profoundly influential. We push it away in the name of civility, in the pursuit of acceptance, in the fear of judgment. And yet, in our denial, we hand it the keys to our lives. The paradox is agonizingly simple. What we repress returns. What we disown controls us. The shadow, unacknowledged, becomes the puppet master behind our compulsions, our irrational anger, our passive aggressions, our sabotaged dreams. The more we insist on our innocence, our goodness, our perfection, the more our buried fragments push their way into the light, often in ways that shock us, embarrass us, or wound those around us. Imagine living in a house where an entire wing is locked, filled with memories you refuse to revisit, fears you pretend not to have, desires that make you uncomfortable, but the house is still yours. And what you lock away doesn't disappear, it festers, grows louder, more desperate, until it breaks down the door. The shadow does not care for your polite refusal. It seeks integration, not exile. There is a woman whose story remains etched in my heart. To the world, she was the embodiment of accomplishment, a partner in a prestigious firm, elegantly dressed, always prepared. She spoke at conferences, mentored rising stars, and appeared to glide through life untouched by chaos. But beneath the polished veneer was a deep fracture. She confided in me, her voice trembling not from weakness, but from the exhaustion of years spent running from her own truth. At 12 years old, her father, in a moment of cold frustration, had called her a disappointment. Just one word, disappointment, and yet it echoed across decades, a ghost embedded in her spine. She never confronted it, she buried it, covered it in accolades and accomplishments, layered it with promotions and praise. But no matter how much she achieved, she couldn't shake the need for external validation. Her sense of worth had been handed over to others. One wrong look from a superior would undo weeks of confidence. One criticism would paralyze her, because the voice of a father long gone still whispered in her ears, "You are not enough." This is what happens when we do not face the shadow. We become performers in a play we did not write, dancing for approval, afraid to stop because the silence might reveal the truth we've buried. We shape our lives around avoidance, around fear, around the need to protect an identity that was never whole to begin with. But here lies the truth that shatters illusions. The shadow is not our enemy. It is the part of us that holds the key to our freedom. It carries not only our wounds, but also our potential. Our passion lies there, wrapped in the rage we were told to suppress. Our creativity lies there, buried beneath the shame we were taught to carry. Our authenticity lies there, behind the masks we crafted for acceptance. When that woman finally allowed herself to return to the memory she had avoided, something extraordinary happened. She didn't fall apart, she didn't break. Instead, she cried not for the man who hurt her, but for the little girl who internalized his words. She grieved not only the pain, but the years lost in its shadow. And in that grief, she found her power, she forgave herself, she stopped outsourcing her worth, she reclaimed her narrative. That is the power of integrating the shadow. It doesn't mean becoming fearless. It means becoming honest. It means sitting with your discomfort, your rage, your envy, your lust, your grief, and saying, I see you. You are part of me, and I will no longer abandon you. This is the path to self-respect, not the brittle pride of the ego, which constantly demands applause, but the quiet dignity of a soul that knows itself. When you stop rejecting parts of yourself, you stop needing others to affirm your existence. You move through the world not as a performance, but as a presence. The journey is not easy. It requires courage, because to face the shadow is to dismantle the story you've told about who you are. It is to admit you are not always kind, not always brave, not always noble. But it is also to discover that you are far more than the roles you play. You are whole, and wholeness includes the dark. There is no transformation without confrontation. There is no peace without conflict. The wound is not the enemy, your refusal to feel it is. The shadow you refuse to face is not simply hidden, it is alive. It makes choices when you don't. It speaks through your silence, acts through your reactivity, punishes you when you try to change. And yet, if you turn toward it with compassion and curiosity, it becomes your greatest teacher. To look into the shadow is to look into the mirror, not to see what you pretend to be, but to witness what you truly are. And in that seeing, something shifts. The chain loosens, the compulsion fades, the rage softens, because what has been seen can be healed, and what has been healed no longer controls you. You may fear what you'll find in the darkness, but the real danger lies in the refusal to look. The true prison is not in what you carry, but in pretending you don't carry it. You are not broken because you have wounds. You are broken only when you deny them. Do not wait until your shadow destroys the life you've built. Do not wait until your relationships unravel, your spirit dims, your body cries out. The call is now to stop running, to stop hiding, to stop pretending. Go inward, listen, speak the truth you've buried, mourn the self you abandoned, and welcome all of who you are. In that act, you become free. In that act, you become powerful, not because you have mastered yourself, but because you have embraced yourself. The shadow no longer lurks. It walks beside you, and you, no longer fragmented, finally come home to yourself. When the soul loses its edges, when it bleeds into everything and everyone without a sense of where it ends and the other begins, dignity is the first casualty. And dignity, though invisible, is the very fabric of self-respect. The architecture of our integrity is formed not in grand declarations, but in the quiet, firm construction of boundaries. These boundaries are not prisons. They are the scaffolding of the self, the unseen, unspoken strength that gives shape to who we are. Without them, we crumble under the weight of everyone else's expectations, needs, and emotions. People-pleasing is one of the most pervasive betrayals of the self. It masquerades as kindness, cloaked in the language of love and service, but make no mistake, this is not love. This is fear wearing a saint's robe. The fear of rejection, the fear of disapproval, the fear of conflict, these fears twist our genuine desire to connect into a compulsion to disappear. Each yes spoken when the heart whispers no is a step away from the center of our being. Each sacrifice made to maintain peace while a war rages within is a denial of one's worth. There is a tragic misconception that martyrdom is noble, that the more we give, the more we bend, the more we disappear, the more virtuous we become. But what if virtue isn't in disappearing, but in daring to exist fully, fiercely, unapologetically, with edges intact? To say no is not to shut others out, but to let the true self in. And only from that place rooted and real can we offer others something authentic, something alive. Look at the data, if you must. In a study by the American Psychological Association, 60% of those who suffered from burnout were also those who struggled to set boundaries. This is no coincidence. Burnout is not merely exhaustion, it is spiritual erosion. It is the slow collapse of the self under the pressure of endless acquiescence. It is the body's way of screaming what the soul has been whispering all along: enough. The antidote is not rest alone, but revolution, a reclaiming of time, of energy, of self. Boundaries are declarations of sacredness. They are the invisible lines we draw to say, I am worthy, I am not infinite. I am not a resource to be mined until empty. When we protect our time, we honor our presence. When we protect our energy, we honor our purpose. When we protect our emotional landscape, we honor our depth. But these lines are often hardest to draw not around others, but within ourselves. We are our own greatest violators. How often do we guilt ourselves into staying, explaining, agreeing, pleasing just to avoid the discomfort of being misunderstood? We become prisoners of our need to be perceived as good. But goodness that costs your soul is not goodness. It is compliance, and compliance without choice is a slow death of spirit. The journey to setting boundaries is not merely behavioral, it is archetypal. It is the hero's confrontation with the shadow, the part of us that fears abandonment, that equates love with surrender, that believes worth must be earned through suffering. To draw a boundary is to step into the unknown with nothing but the conviction that I matter. It is a rite of passage into selfhood. It is not easy, but what transformation ever is. And yet, as we begin this work, something remarkable happens. Clarity emerges. The fog of resentment lifts. Our relationships deepen not because we give more, but because we give more truthfully. There is a sacredness in a no that protects a deeper yes. There is intimacy in honesty that people, pleasing, can never offer. Love, after all, is not about merging, it is about meeting, and we cannot meet another fully if we have abandoned ourselves. Those who set boundaries do not lack compassion, they have simply learned that compassion must begin at home. They have learned that protecting the soul's flame is not selfishness, but stewardship. They have understood that the world does not need more self-sacrificing martyrs, it needs more lit up, awake, whole people. People who can say, this is who I am, this is what I need, this is where I end and you begin. And if the world calls you harsh for that, so be it. Let it call you names, let it misunderstand, because the soul that knows its own name, its own needs, and its own limits, that soul can never be diminished by outside noise. That soul is no longer living to please. It is living to live. Let us then begin the sacred labor of reclaiming our borders. Let us see boundaries not as walls, but as windows through which our truest self can shine. Let us understand that every time we choose self-respect over self-erasure, we teach the world how to treat us, and more importantly, we teach ourselves that we are worth the space we take. Your time, your energy, your heart, these are not infinite wells. They are treasures. They are sacred fires that must be tended, not tossed recklessly into the winds of others' demands. To protect them is not to hoard, but to honor. To protect them is to say, I am here, and I am worthy of my own care. May you find the strength to draw the lines that liberate you. May you let go of the lie that your worth is measured by your usefulness. May you remember that every boundary is a promise not just to others, but to yourself. A promise that says, I will not abandon me, not again, not ever. The world reflects back to us not what we desire, but what we permit. And in the quiet moments between our choices and our consequences lies the architecture of our identity, built not from grand declarations, but from the subtle agreements we make with our own suffering. What you tolerate, you do not merely endure, you endorse. You write it into the invisible contract between yourself and others, and the ink with which it is written is your silence, your hesitation, your unwillingness to claim the wholeness of your being. Consider, for a moment, the man who remained entangled in a love that only ever echoed his inadequacy. Day after day, he returned to a house that had long since ceased to be a home, trying to reshape himself into a version that would finally be enough to silence the criticism, to win the affection that was withheld, to make her see him. But in truth, It was not she who failed to see him. It was he who refused to look in the mirror and acknowledge the sacredness of his own soul. Every time he chose endurance over confrontation, apology over boundary, he chiseled away a piece of himself, mistaking resilience for worthiness. We are taught from early life that love is earned, that approval is the reward for conformity. This conditioning carves deep grooves into our psyche, and before we realize it, we are living inside the expectations of others, not the calling of our own spirit. When we tolerate behavior that wounds us, diminishes us, or belittles our humanity, we are not being kind or patient or noble, we are abandoning ourselves. And what's more, we are teaching others to do the same. People do not treat us as we are, they treat us as we allow. We model for them the boundaries of our value, the edges of our self-respect. To allow disrespect is to invite it. To accept manipulation is to normalize it. The outer world learns from our inner one. The silent man teaches others that his voice need not be heard. The always available woman teaches others that her time is not sacred. The one who apologizes for having needs becomes the one whose needs are forgotten. We think we are being good, accommodating, forgiving, understanding, but in truth, we are being complicit in the erosion of our own worth. Not because we are weak, but because we are afraid to be alone. Afraid to be misunderstood, afraid to believe that we are enough without permission, and this fear is the great puppeteer, pulling the strings that make us dance to someone else's rhythm, forgetting the music of our own soul. But there comes a moment quiet, tremulous, yet powerful when the cost of staying becomes greater than the fear of leaving. When the soul, battered but unbroken, whispers that it is time to remember who you are beneath the masks. Time to stop pleading for love like a beggar at the gates of your own palace. That moment, fragile as a flame in the wind, is the beginning of your return. And that man, shaking, exhausted, unsure, finally walked away. Not in anger, but in awakening. He left not just a person, but a pattern. He abandoned the belief that his value was conditional, that his dignity was something that could be traded for approval. In the silence that followed, he began to hear the voice he had long ignored, his own. With each small act of self-honor, he laid a new brick in the temple of his inner world. No one applauded, there were no guarantees, but something in him was healing, not because someone else had changed, but because he had. To become unwilling to tolerate what diminishes your spirit is not an act of cruelty. It is the highest form of love for yourself and ultimately for others. For when you demand integrity in your life, you invite others to rise. You become a mirror not of their flaws, but of their potential, and some will walk away unable or unwilling to meet you there. Let them, release them with grace. Their departure is not your failure, it is your liberation. Respect is not a plea, it is a frequency you emit, a standard you live by. It is found in how you speak about yourself when no one is listening, in what you refuse to justify, in how quickly you return to your truth when it is threatened. And make no mistake, it will be threatened. Growth always threatens comfort, especially in those who have benefited from your silence. But do not let that deter you. You are not here to make others comfortable with your diminishment. You are here to become whole. You are here to remember that your life is a sacred text, and every time you say no to what wounds you, you turn a page toward redemption. Every time you choose peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, self-respect over approval, you teach the world how to meet you. You are not here to carry the weight of unspoken expectations. You are not here to explain away the bruises on your spirit. You are not here to prove yourself worthy of decency. You are here to live in alignment with the truth of your being fierce, radiant, irreducible, and that begins the moment you decide, I will no longer teach others to wound me by tolerating the wounding myself. This is not about judgment. We all have moments when we shrink, when we compromise, when we confuse endurance with love. It is part of the human journey, But let us not stay there. Let us not build our homes in the land of almost enough. Let us rise not with arrogance, but with sacred defiance. Let us draw the line not in anger, but in reverence, not to separate ourselves from others, but to reunite ourselves with the truth that we were never meant to be caged by convenience, that our spirits were not designed for appeasement, that we are not here to make others comfortable at the expense of our own becoming. What you tolerate, you teach others to repeat, and what you honor within yourself, you teach others to revere. So choose. Choose again and again. Choose the integrity of your soul over the illusion of peace. Choose to walk away if you must, even if your hands tremble, even if your voice shakes, especially if it does, for the trembling is not weakness. It is the shedding of the old self. It is the birth cry of freedom. It is the sound of a life reclaiming itself. And in that sound, in that sacred choice, you become not only a force of change in your own life, but a beacon for others still trapped in the belief that their worth is up for negotiation. You show them not by preaching, but by living that we train the world how to treat us by what we accept. And that there is no greater act of courage than to accept nothing less than the truth of who you are. We find ourselves navigating a world that endlessly demands performance. From the moment we rise to the moment we lay our heads down in silence, we are slipping into roles sculpted not by our own essence, but by the expectations of others. We do this so seamlessly that it begins to feel normal. We laugh a little louder at jokes we don't find funny. We agree when our insides scream disagreement. We nod when we want to walk away. And slowly, without noticing, we begin to drift. We drift from who we are. This distance from the self, though subtle at first, becomes the silent architect of a great inner unrest, a disquiet that no amount of validation or external success can quiet. For every time we wear a mask, we suffocate the very soul we were meant to express. We wear these masks thinking they protect us, thinking they make us more lovable, more acceptable, but they imprison the self we were born to become. And over time, the person we are pretending to be becomes more familiar than the person we truly are. This is the great tragedy of modern life, the erosion of authenticity in favor of acceptance. But we must ask, what is the cost of this acceptance if it comes at the expense of our own truth? Look within. Not as an act of fleeting introspection, but as a courageous journey into the wild forest of your own being. There is a voice in that forest. It is not loud. It does not scream. It does not demand. It waits patiently to be heard. And when it is heard, really heard, it begins to whisper truths that feel ancient, yet are deeply personal. This voice does not ask you to impress, to charm, or to contort yourself into the preferences of others. It only asks you to be as you were made, to be whole. Imagine, for a moment, the mighty oak tree. It does not envy the willow. It does not try to sway delicately in the wind like the birch, or reach upward in desperation like the pine. It grows according to its own pattern, slow and steady, with roots deep in the earth. It knows what it is, and because it knows what it is, it stands with a kind of dignity that cannot be manufactured or mimicked. This is authenticity, not a performance, but a profound alignment with your own nature. We too must root ourselves in who we are. But unlike the oak, we are born into a society that teaches us to doubt our own essence. From childhood, we are praised not for our authenticity, but for our obedience, for fitting in, for coloring within the lines, and so we learn often unconsciously that the self must be trimmed, adjusted, camouflaged. We do not even realize that we have been trained to abandon ourselves, and yet the soul does not forget. The soul remembers who you were before the world told you who to be. The soul aches to return to that original design. And the ache, if ignored, becomes depression. It becomes anxiety. It becomes the sensation of living a life that looks right but feels wrong, and no amount of external achievement can soothe that ache, because the longing is not for more, it is for real. The paradox is that the very thing we fear rejection becomes more likely when we are not authentic. Because even if the world applauds your performance, it does not know you. And how can you be loved if you are not known? How can you be respected if the person being praised is a shadow of your real self? We think that pretending will protect us, but it only ensures that we remain unseen. And to be unseen is a slow spiritual death. Authenticity, then, is not a luxury or a personality trait, it is a necessity. It is the root of inner power, because only from that place of truth can we act with conviction. Only from that place can we speak with a voice that shakes the room. When you are aligned with your true self, you become unshakable, not because life gets easier, but because you are no longer betraying yourself to survive it. And something remarkable happens when you begin to live from that place. Others take notice, not because you are louder or flashier or more agreeable, but because authenticity has a magnetic quality. People are drawn to those who are real because we are all starving for permission to be real ourselves. When you shed your masks, you become a mirror in which others can see their own hidden selves. You don't need to convince anyone of your worth. Your very presence becomes a quiet revolution. This is why the path of authenticity, though it may at first feel lonely, is ultimately the most powerful form of leadership. You stop chasing love, and love begins to find you. You stop begging for respect, and respect grows in the wake of your integrity. Because what the world truly respects is not perfection, it is honesty, it is courage, it is the quiet, relentless refusal to be anything other than yourself. But be warned, this path is not easy. To live authentically is to walk into fire, the fire of discomfort, of uncertainty, of potential rejection. But it is also to walk into freedom, into joy, into a life where your soul is no longer a prisoner of your performance. And that freedom, that unshakable knowing of who you are, is a force more powerful than any approval the world can offer. We must become fluent in the language of our own truth. We must learn to honor it, even when it is inconvenient, even when it sets us apart. Because the greatest tragedy is not to be misunderstood by others, it is to misunderstand ourselves. To go to the grave never having lived as the person we truly are. The world does not need more polished personas. It does not need more perfectly curated lives. It needs people who are brave enough to be real. People who stand like oak trees, not bending with every breeze of opinion, not reshaping themselves to avoid conflict, but grounded in truth. Steady, present, alive, so if you find yourself tired of pretending, listen to that fatigue. It is not weakness, it is your soul trying to awaken. Let it speak, let it lead. The masks you wear may keep you safe, but they will never let you soar. Only when you shed them can you step into the raw, radiant force of your own being. And in that place, finally, you will be free. There is a realm within each of us that remains largely uncharted, a shadowed interior where the echoes of old voices live on. These voices do not belong to us in origin, yet they parade in the theater of our thoughts as if they were sovereign. They speak in familiar tones, wearing the faces of former teachers who scolded instead of taught, of parents who loved but did not always understand, of a society that trades in comparisons and measures the soul by standards it did not help to create. The voice is subtle yet persistent, often whispering its poison in moments of vulnerability. You are not good enough. It says, you are failing. It hisses, you are a fraud. And too often, without interrogation, we believe it. This inner critic, this psychic fragment forged in childhood and shaped by culture, is not the voice of truth. It is the residue of fear, the internalization of punishment, the ghost of unmet expectations. But here lies the most profound and liberating truth. You are not obligated to believe every thought that visits your mind. Thoughts come and go. They are not commands. They are not oracles. They are not always yours. To confront the inner critic is to step into the sacred space of awareness. It is to look inward not with fear or avoidance, but with the steady gaze of a soul seeking truth. This confrontation is not a battle in the traditional sense: no swords, no armor, no enemies. It is an unveiling, a quiet but courageous act of separating the authentic self from the noise of conditioned shame. The inner tyrant does not respond to more tyranny. It retreats only when it is met with a deeper authority, the voice of inner wisdom, calm and resolute. There is empirical evidence to illuminate this inner journey. Researchers at the University of Michigan found that individuals who practiced self-compassion, who dared to respond to failure with kindness, to struggle with gentleness, and to disappointment with grace, were more successful in achieving their goals than those who berated themselves. This is not weakness, this is power rightly channeled. Self-compassion, when rightly understood, is not indulgence. It is a spiritual rebellion against the internalized cruelty we have mistaken for discipline. Imagine this: you speak to yourself not as a warden, but as a mentor, not as a judge, but as a friend, not as an accuser, but as a guardian of your own potential. The words you direct inward shape the architecture of your inner world. Harsh words create prisons. Gentle but honest words build sanctuaries. There is strength in discipline, but only when discipline is infused with love. Otherwise, it becomes control, and control, as we know, is fear in disguise. The process of transformation begins not in the outer world, but within. When you learn to dialogue with yourself in a new way, when the inner voice becomes a source of nourishment rather than punishment, something extraordinary occurs. Self-respect is born not from perfection, but from presence, from the realization that your worth is not conditional, not earned by constant achievement or external approval, but intrinsic. The sacredness of your being was never meant to be measured by productivity. The inner critic thrives in silence and secrecy. It festers in the dark recesses of an unexamined mind, but when brought to light, it loses its grip. You begin to see its pattern. You begin to question its authority. And most importantly, you begin to choose differently. You choose to be patient with your growth. You choose to speak to yourself the way you would to someone you love, with firmness, yes, but also with forgiveness. You choose to walk through failure without tying it to your identity. This choice is not made once. It is made daily, moment by moment. Each time the old voice returns, as it inevitably will, you meet it with something deeper. You remind yourself, this thought is not the whole of me, this voice is not the seat of truth. I can hear it, but I do not have to obey it. The practice is not in silencing the critic forever. That is not realistic. The practice is in no longer bowing before it. It is in turning toward yourself with open arms, even when your instinct is to turn away. Let us not mistake self-compassion for passivity. It is one of the most radical acts a person can undertake in a culture obsessed with criticism and comparison. It requires strength to show yourself mercy. It requires clarity to see that growth is not the enemy of gentleness. In fact, the two are intertwined. True growth does not come from inner warfare, it comes from inner alignment. From the recognition that healing is possible and that the inner landscape can be recultivated to support rather than sabotage your evolution. And so, the invitation is this: go inward with courage. Greet the inner critic not with fear, but with understanding. Ask it where it came from. Ask it whose voice it truly is. And then, when it cannot answer, allow it to fade. Replace it with a new voice. One that speaks truth with love, one that calls you forward without cutting you down, one that knows your wounds but also your worth. For in this sacred labor, in this quiet revolution of the heart, you will find something far more enduring than perfection. You will find your own humanity. And in that discovery, the chains of old judgments will fall away, and in their place, A deeper freedom will rise, a freedom born not from being flawless, but from being fully, gloriously, unapologetically whole. When a man or woman begins to walk the path of self-respect, there is a tectonic shift that occurs, not in the outer world first, but in the deepest chambers of the psyche. It is the stirring of a long, dormant force, the quiet but undeniable emergence of a center that no longer seeks validation in the eyes of others. This center, once buried beneath the debris of self, doubt and societal expectation, begins to pulse with life, with clarity. The individual no longer views themselves as an object to be improved for the approval of others, but as a subject, living, breathing, sacred, worthy in their own right. And with this shift, all relationships begin to transform. To respect oneself is not merely to look in the mirror and recite affirmations. It is to stand at the altar of your own becoming and bow. It is to look at your past mistakes, your wounds, your betrayals, and declare that you are not defined by them. Rather, you are forged through them, and in this recognition, a mysterious power awakens. The soul that has found its own worth can no longer abide the falsehoods it once tolerated. It can no longer remain in the company of those who diminish its light, not out of pride, but because it has remembered its own sanctity. This remembering is painful. It demands courage, for to respect oneself often means walking away, not in anger, but in truth. It means releasing hands once clung to, not because they were evil, but because they could no longer walk beside the new self that is emerging. It means choosing solitude over shallow company, silence over noise, integrity over approval. And in the wake of this departure, there is a void, a terrifying space where the familiar used to be. But it is in this void that the real miracle occurs. That which is false falls away, and that which is true begins to gravitate toward the individual like stars returning to orbit around a sun. No longer do you chase affection, praise, or connection. You become like a lighthouse, still, unwavering, radiant. You stand firm on your foundation, casting your light not in desperation, but in invitation. Those who are meant for you will recognize your signal. They will not require you to dim your light to accommodate their shadows. They will not demand that you shrink to fit their comfort. They will arrive not to rescue or to be rescued, but to walk alongside you in mutual recognition. It is a radical thing in this world to stand still in your worth. The lifeboat rescues because it needs to feel useful, it needs to be needed. But the lighthouse rescues by simply being. It illuminates. It guides, and those who see it and are ready to anchor themselves in truth will come. This is not arrogance. This is alignment. This is the natural consequence of honoring yourself. We have been taught that love is sacrifice, that to be good is to give endlessly. But without self-respect, giving becomes self-erasure. We bleed ourselves dry and call it compassion, but there is no true giving without wholeness. There is no authentic connection without boundaries. There is no real love where the self is abandoned. When we begin to respect ourselves, we do not stop giving. We give more deeply, more powerfully, more truly. But we no longer give to be seen. We give because it flows from a place of abundance, not scarcity. I have witnessed again and again the miracle that unfolds when someone reclaims their self-respect. They lose people, yes, but these losses are not punishments. They are purifications. The friendships that were based on convenience, the partnerships that thrived on imbalance, the loves that demanded self-sacrifice, all of them fall away like leaves from a tree in autumn. And though the branches may feel bare for a time, what follows is a spring of astonishing beauty. A circle forms, not of many, but of the right ones, people who do not need you to pretend, people who see you not as a function, but as a soul, people who honor your light because they are no longer threatened by it. And it is in these relationships, forged in the crucible of mutual respect, that real growth begins. These are not merely friendships or romances. They are sacred alliances. They are mirrors that do not distort. In their presence, we do not have to strive, we simply have to be, And in being, we are seen, and in being seen, we heal. This is the alchemy of self-respect. It transforms not only the individual, but the relational field in which they move. It shifts the frequency of who we allow near, of what we will accept, of how we will love and be loved. We begin to recognize the difference between chemistry and alignment, between intensity and intimacy. We begin to understand that peace is not the absence of passion, but the presence of authenticity. The world will not always celebrate this transformation. There will be those who label it selfishness. There will be those who accuse you of changing, and they will be right. You have changed. You are no longer willing to trade your truth for company. You are no longer willing to play roles to avoid discomfort. You are no longer a character in someone else's story. You are now the author of your own. In reclaiming self-respect, you do not become better than others. You become better for yourself. And in doing so, you elevate the standard of every connection you touch. You call others to meet you in the realm of the real. You say, without saying, "This is who I am. Come as you are or do not come at all." And this invitation, though it may sound harsh, is the kindest gift you can offer the world. For it invites others into their own self-respect, their own awakening. And so, as you walk this path, not upward, but inward, know that the journey will be both lonely and luminous. Know that you are not meant to carry everyone with you. Some must find their own way, but know too that on the other side of your shedding lies a tribe, a communion, a fellowship of souls who have dared to honor their own light and now recognize it in you. This is where love lives, not in performance, not in people. Pleasing, but in presence, in truth. In the sacred act of being who you are without apology and allowing the world to respond accordingly. So I ask you, what would happen if you stood in your worth unapologetically? What if the next time the world offered you less, you simply said, "No, I am more than that"? The world reflects back to you what you reflect within. Until you respect yourself, your story, your soul, your scars, you will chase scraps. But when you finally see your own light, others will be blinded by its brilliance. You are not here to earn worth. You are here to remember it, and the moment you do, everything changes. Thank you.